Oh, hello everyone. How's everyone's Thursday? No big deal. Oh boy, I gotta mute my Twitch. There we go. Um, no big deal. Feminist Frequency is just turning 11 today. What does that mean? That I've just been doing this for so long. If you don't know, Feminist Frequency is turning 11 today, like I just said, and we are having a huge celebration this evening. 5 p.m. to midnight right here on Twitch. We're going to have so many guests and so many games and so many giveaways and some really cool, exciting performances. So mark your calendars for today. Set a timer for 5 p.m. Pacific. Wake up if you aren't in this time zone because you're not going to want to miss this. That said, we are also in the middle of a fundraiser. You know this. Today is the very last day. And last time I checked, we're only $4,000 away from raising our goal. So if you want to help us with that, because every dollar counts, you can do that at givebutter.com/stayinthegame. I'm sure that will pop up in the chat at some point. And it is to support 4 nonprofits that work to serve the games industry. So with all of that out of the way, I would like to bring on our next guest for this week, which I'm really excited about. Erika Wheelhouse is, oh my goodness, what is happening to my brain? Hello, Erika. You are now with us. Erika is a youth and family therapist with the Strive Family Resources, and I'm so excited to have you come on and talk to us about parenting during a pandemic, because I think a lot of people are and have been pretty stressed out about this, right?
I think it's one of those things that when it hits, everybody's like, at first, like, this is not going to be a thing. And then it's a thing.
It's a thing. Yeah. Well, so let's start. Well, we're going to get into all of that, but I want to start by just learning a little bit more about what you do and what the Strive Family Resources are, how that grammar, whatever.
I'm a licensed therapist. I work as an outpatient therapist with families and teens. And then I started Strive last year because I felt there was a big need for educating families and parents, not just on mental health issues, but also child development issues, learning disorders. Just the things that are helpful for parents to understand when they have maybe, kids are having a meltdown and they don't really understand why, or they just want basic information on what are developmental milestones.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. So I'm not a parent. I hope that I am never a parent. That is my life goal. But I have so many friends with children and of all different ages right now. And I think in this moment, everyone is just trying to figure out how to navigate both like the logistics of having everyone at home all the time and also the anxiety of the parents, the anxiety of the kids, and kind of it feels like everyone is just doing the best they can. And some days it's just that doesn't feel very good. So yeah, I thought maybe we would chat a little bit about like what you're seeing right now in terms of any of the families or the youth that you work with and how people are holding up.
I think it's been a smattering of everything. Some people have managed it well. Others have managed it well, had a slight, hiccup, and then kept on going, and we're fine. I think everybody has dealt with it in a way that made sense for them. And I don't think there's any wrong way to deal with it as long as you're able to seek out support and talk and kind of be aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And responding to it in a healthy way.
Which isn't always, not everyone feels like they can seek support or that they should or that there's value to it. And so I think some of what the resources you're providing are helping to destigmatize help-seeking behaviors. It's one of the things that we're trying to do with the hotline for the games industry, that encouraging people to actually be like, hey, no, things are hard right now, and maybe I could talk to someone, or maybe I can get some support. So, okay, so we're in, I don't know, day 563 of the pandemic. Who knows? What people might be, week to week, I think everything changes and feelings change and emotions change. But what are some of the tips that you might have to get folks thinking a little bit about how to situate right now for themselves?
I think one of the biggest things is to have that ability to sit down with yourself for a couple minutes and figure out where you are. How are you functioning? What areas maybe do you need to work on a little bit more? What areas do you just need to be able to say, it's not going to happen. I'm okay with it and move on. Like homeschooling. If you're a parent working from home and you have 3 kids, is it really realistic for you to sit down and make sure everything is going perfectly fine, do your work perfectly well, get dinner? No. I mean, that's holding yourself up to a really unrealistic expectation. And it's okay to be able to say, yep, I got the basics down, everything else can just wait.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were saying that, it just made me think about the idea in general of like, women are supposed to do it all, right? That, you're supposed to juggle work and a home life and be an amazing cook and always be in a good mood and like do everything really well. And right now that's like amped up to 5,000, right? Like it was hard enough to have a job and your kids and your home life, let alone never let alone having them all together at the same time. So what about like boundaries? How do you do boundary setting in this kind of environment?
I think it's really important, especially depending on the age of the kids, to realize that problem solving it's a team sport. You need everybody's involvement, everybody to buy in and to recognize where the boundaries are, why they exist, and what's appropriate. For example, if you have a 17-year-old, they're not going to want to be around their 8 or 7-year-old sibling all the time. And you need to have that conversation with both of them so they can figure out, the older sibling, they're going to need some space, and the younger sibling is going to have to understand that that's a respectful thing to do. And they're also going to get that respect in return.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I feel like routines are really important right now as well, even though it can be kind of hard to keep up a routine.
It is. Structure is so important. And I know people have seen it over and over and read about it and heard about it, but I think it's one of the most important things in keeping balance and keeping some kind of sense of normalcy, because time is just a big blob right now. We don't have the differentiation of, school has ended. It's now the weekend. It's a holiday weekend. And that doesn't make any sense right now because what are we going to do? Well, let's stay home for the weekend. So I think it's important to have a schedule, and it can be just a basic schedule. Like we're going to get up around this time. We're going to, do schoolwork around this time. We're going to eat at this time. We're going to do family-centered activities, or we're going to do our own thing at other certain times. And to make sure that everybody is aware so that there isn't the question of, well, what time is dinner? When do I do my homework? When do I get some free time to play video games? And also, it's going to help the parents because they're going to say, okay, this is school time. What are you doing for school? What's involved? That's your focus right now.
Yeah.
Put the video game down.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Well, and so how can kids maybe feel empowered to participate in this? Like give them, when everything is out of control, it can feel like it can make things more difficult. So is there a way to get the kids involved in feeling like they have some control over their lives in this moment?
Yeah, and especially it goes back to having that buy-in. If you sit down and say, okay, we need to have homework done, 3, 4, or 5 times a week, what time do you think is going to be best? Do you want to do it when you get up in the morning? Do you want to do it right after lunch? Do you want to do it before lunch? Give choices, and make sure everybody's agreeing to it and that they understand that this is something that's important. And it may not go exactly the same way every day, but those are the expectations. Because when we have expectations, there isn't that vague, abstract sense of nobody's in control. Nothing is going, there's no normal. This way, there is some sense of normalcy, and it's, structure lets us feel like, okay, I got this. I know what I'm supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. And then they feel like they have some choice in, or that like, even though it's a contained choice, they still have some control over, yeah, we have to do our homework, but I get to choose when I do my homework, right? It's a weird thing, but I think it feels narrow, but I think that the narrowness of that can be really helpful. It's the small things. I know this is not the same, but it might be orbiting the same environment where when I talk to folks who are dealing with like a lot of online harassment, just giving them a tiny task to do helps so much, right? Just even though it doesn't stop the harassment, it doesn't like change the reality of what's happening, it does make you feel a little bit in control of the situation by changing your passwords or, whatever the task might be.
Absolutely. And being busy, being active is such an important part of feeling like we have a purpose. And once we lose that sense of purpose, it can be a little scary. That's when the anxiety starts kicking in. It's like, well, if I can't control anything, who is controlling things? And it's a very, it's one of those things that humans love is a sense of purpose, and we need that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, What about I keep thinking about the fact that like kids at different ages, right? We're talking about like the difference between having a baby at home versus having like a 7-year-old versus having a 17-year-old are all very different developmental age groups. But feeling anxiety and understanding what's happening, like how do parents support their kids who are like, I'm afraid to go outside now, or I have a friend who they had to take their daughter to a doctor's for some reason or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but that their daughter had not left the house in weeks and was freaking out about it because outside is now dangerous, right? Like what coping tools are there for parents in helping their children?
I think one of the most important parts of it is one, like you mentioned, model and teach the idea of reaching out, of being able to verbalize, I don't feel well right now. I'm afraid. And for parents to listen and to acknowledge and accept that, there's fear and anxiety, and they don't have to fix it. They don't have to rescue. They have, listen and empathize and say, you know what? Yeah, it is kind of scary right now. And then again, go back to, but we're doing the important things. We're washing our hands. We're wearing our masks. We're keeping things clean. We're doing the important things. And then to focus on what that means in terms of the positive outcomes rather than, we're doing this so that we don't get sick. We're doing it because we're staying healthy. We're doing the things, to stay well. We're doing the appropriate things that we need to do. But to acknowledge that fear is normal, anxiety is normal, it's okay. And to make sure, and I know, big humans, when we see a little human suffering or afraid, we want to like jump in and say, oh, don't be afraid. It's okay. It'll be fine. That can be very minimizing to somebody's emotions. And instead of wanting to protect them, which is normal, empathize and listen to them and let them verbalize it so that they understand like, oh, it's okay to be afraid. I can actually talk about being afraid, and it's a normal, natural, part of being a human.
Yeah. If y'all have any questions for Erika, please drop them in the chat and I will get to them when I see them. I feel like that what you just articulated is also relevant for adults, like a big human to big human communicate. I love this big human analogy. Communication to each other, right? That a lot of times we just want to be like, it'll be fine, you'll be great, don't be nervous, or you'll get through it or whatever. Well, that's different, but that you can't predict the future, and usually people aren't going to feel better by by being like, don't worry, everything happens for a reason, and you're like, shut up. Like, I like, my feelings are real, and so that advice I think can go across communication with all people, really. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you have an acronym idea that you use sometimes in these kinds of situations. Do you want to share that with us?
Sure. I use acronyms because I have no memory whatsoever. And it's an
Perfect.
easy way to kind of understand and remind myself what needs to be done in order for me to handle or cope with things. It's idea, and the first part is ID, to identify the emotion. Because I think that's one of the biggest parts of dealing with emotions. Once we feel them, to know what they are, rather than just having this unsettling feeling, especially if you have a feeling that's one of the uncomfortable ones, being able to identify it and say, okay, it's anxiety or if it's fear or whatever. The second part of it is figuring out how to express it in a healthy way. It's okay to be anxious or angry or upset, but making sure that you're expressing it in a way that's healthy, that's not harming or demeaning to anyone, and to really sit back and understand that, uh, you know, expressing it is important. Holding it inside and trying to keep it captive isn't going to work. And the last part, A, is for acknowledging and accepting that it's a natural part of being human to have emotions. It's part of how we are wired, and it's a necessary part of also connecting with other people. So the idea part is a nice way to kind of remember what do I do with these emotions.
I like that a lot. Yeah, that's really great. We do actually have a question that just popped into chat. It's Scully23 says, I don't have kids, but work remotely with several people who do. What can I do to support them?
I think one of the biggest things that I always hear from parents is when they're working with people who don't have kids, is they worry that they're coming across as flustered or not focusing enough on work, or that they're being judged because they're splitting their attention span. So I think supporting and letting them know that they understand, hey, how's your day going? How are things? And asking, is there anything I can do? What do you need? Can I support you, in a way that's going to help you focus on work? Also, not worry so much about the parenting idea.
Yeah, nice. One thing that I've been concerned about and have seen other people bring up, and I'm not sure how much we can get into this, but, not all homes are healthy homes emotionally. There is a lot of toxicity, whether you're stuck at home with parents who don't don't believe your gender identity or are abusive, or or the flip, right? Whether it's parents with abusive kids or kids with abusive parents. Are there things that people can do in these moments where they're kind of stuck in a space that just feels so dreadful to them?
I think one of the most important things is finding out what your local resources are. Like the Trevor Project, they have an amazing line that you can call or text. I believe you can call or text. And being able to talk to somebody, to just being able to verbalize that things are not going well, that you would like to hear some validation about who you are, is a huge part of being able to get through difficult times. When you have another human connect with you and validate you, and it's such a powerful moment that sometimes it does give you the strength to get through.
Yeah.
Because it is really scary right now for a lot of people who are at home and don't have the social supports that they once had.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things right now too, I think, is like people talk about self-care and self-compassion, and what does that mean? What does that look like?
Self-care is the idea of being gentle with yourself, of, because we are so judgmental of ourselves. We can be so critical of the littlest things that we do, like, oh, I should have done that better. I should have done that better. That can start, we internalize that, and that can start setting us down a really negative thought process about who we are and our abilities. And I think especially for parents, there's that extra layer of judgment. So I think sitting back and being able to be gentle with yourself, acknowledge that you're human. Things are not going to always go well, and to let some of that negativity go without judgment, and just accept that I'm human. I'm going to do stupid things. I'm going to screw up. It's okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Our guests next week that are coming on to talk about burnout and talk about focusing more on community care than self-care, the idea that trauma comes from the world, and therefore why would we try to solve that by ourselves? And I just wanted to sort of introduce that in this context of self-care, and what does it mean to have community and have community care during this moment when we're actually physically distanced from people.
I think that's one of I think initially when the it started that we were staying at home, I don't think anybody realized it was going to last this long.
Yeah.
So initially we were okay with, sure, I'll stay home for 2 weeks. That's fine. But now that we don't get to see our friends face to face, there isn't that physical contact. I think it's extra important now to make time and to really, with intent, go out and connect with our friends, whether by phone to hear their voice, video, whatever opportunity you have. Stand across the street and wave to your neighbors. I mean, as silly as it sounds, but just acknowledging that there's somebody else who's close to you and that you're not just, existing in this one cube that's your house. Because we don't exist separately as humans. We're wired to be social. We're wired to need each other.
Yeah.
And to be mindful of that without putting the expectations that other people are going to save us or, fix it, to know that we need that support so that we can take care of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question in chat from Sparkly Kiss. Hello. A friend of mine has limited custody of their kid, and the pandemic has made it more difficult for them. What do you suggest for families that are separated in this way?
It really depends on the relationship with the other parent. It depends on, if you have the ability to see your child physically, and they're old enough to understand what's going on, have the conversation with the child to let them know. You don't have to express all of your feelings to your kiddos, but let them know that it is difficult for them, for you just as much, that you do miss them or want to support them. And I think a lot of it goes to being able to verbalize and to have that discussion with the other parent to make sure that everybody's needs are being met, not just physical, but the emotional part of that too. Because kids have an amazing ability to observe and to understand and to get that sense of parents are not doing well.
Yeah.
So to bring them into that conversation. So again, give them a sense of control. And so they're not just set aside wondering what's going on, with my parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it reminds me of the parents who are separated, whether it's divorce or just separation or what have you, that have a very toxic relationship, and how in the best of times it wasn't working well, and that communication. I don't really have a question. I'm actually just thinking of some friends of mine who have toxic former partners that they still have to co-parent with. And how do you trust them to take care of your kids when they're not with you, or, to be involved in that way. And this reminded me of how really challenging that is in this moment, more so than how difficult it normally is.
Absolutely. And again, depending a lot on the ages of the child, and the other part of that is figuring out, do you need extra support? I'm a licensed therapist. I'm very biased about, people having a therapist, having somebody who is completely on your side and who can support you. And it's important for the kids as well, because the kids see it, the kids know it, and they don't want to upset anybody. They don't want their parents to be upset.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids start to internalize that. And I think it's important for them to also have that backup, that support, so that they can talk to somebody who's not emotionally invested in them like parents are.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a question from Neko that says, I'm not a parent or living with parents, but I am living with grandparents. Is there anything I can do to make it easier on my grandparents without backing off on trying my best to get them to respect my gender identity?
Oh, that is such a good question. And it's also a difficult question. Sometimes it's very, very, very difficult for people to understand. And it's one of, I think, the worst positions for anyone to be in, to have an identity that is not validated Um, and I honestly don't know if there is a way that you can have somebody, we can't force somebody to see, believe, or understand something unless they're willing to. Um, I think one of the hardest parts is to acknowledge that somebody you love loves you, but they don't totally understand you. Um, and, I really wish that I could, give you some amazing advice that would help all of that. I don't have anything, and I'm sorry. But just to know that it is a difficult situation, I understand that it is. And if you can understand that they love you, they may not understand you or completely accept you, and I'm sorry. Um, but sometimes that's all we can ask for, especially in situations where we're stuck.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not a replacement for being dismissed in that way from family, but also like finding community that does validate you in some ways. If you can like reach out to them and have that support network in place, like it's not the answer to it, but at least it's some more support and validation. We have another question. Here, sorry, I was just pulling it up from the incredible Barf Truck 69. What a name. But I think it's a really good question. What helps you pull through, and how do you support people around you from a distance when online meetings aren't possible?
Oh, good question. If there's no online meetings, if you can do it verbally, um, by phone, um, being able to hear somebody's voice and be able to connect them and give them that space so they can express what they're going through, and that you could verbalize support back for them. If that's not possible, writing letters, whatever needs to happen so that you can still stay connected with them, texting, um, you know, sending memes, doing anything you can to remind them that you love them, you're there for them. And if at all possible, being able to give them that space where they can talk and verbalize and express what's going on with them.
Nice. I am all about postcards. When I traveled, I would send postcards to folks, and it was just like everyone loved it. And then I would go visit my friends, and they would be on their fridges. And we are so digital that getting something in the mail that's not like a bill. Do people even get bills in the mail anymore? I don't even know. And I think now is a really lovely time to bring back like pen pals and postcards and like handwritten notes. I know several people who for birthdays have reached out to their friend group and said, hey, will you mail us something for me to give to my partner for their birthday or what have you? And so not that that's necessarily the answer to this question, but I do want to put that out there because I want more people to do that. And then if you're in the U.S., at least you can support the U.S. Postal Service, because
Yes.
This is a dumpster fire country, and we need to support the Federal Postal Service. Let me see. Do we have other questions in here? If you have questions, please throw them in. But yeah, I feel like we covered a huge range here. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up, or things that you've noticed that you think would be useful to share?
I think one of the biggest things that I have noticed is it's the extent to which people are growing aware of their feelings and the need to cope with them and manage them. Because when you're in a house with other people, or even if you're by yourself, there's a lot of time to think, and you're interacting, and maybe everybody's, has a little case of the grumpies going on. To acknowledge that and to figure out the best ways for you to cope with it. Is it taking time out for yourself? Is it, doing some mindfulness, meditating, getting your mind off of it? Is it playing an extra hour of video games? Reading a book? What do you need to do to manage your emotions so that you're not bouncing off or impacting the people around you?
Yeah.
Who may also be in that same space.
Actually, that reminded me of, what about, so screen time for kids is a big deal for parenting, and like, why don't you talk about that, right?
Yeah, that is so tough because, so many, child experts are like, oh, stay away from the screen. We're dealing with generations who they have screens in the womb. I mean, these kids are ready. They know technology so well. There's a reason why the, digital natives is a thing. The first thing is, if you are trying to encourage your kids to learn boundaries around screen time and help them understand why it's important, not to stay up until 4 o'clock to play video games, is to go through that experience with them. We learn by doing. And so we're not going to learn about boundaries by somebody telling us, don't play, past 4 o'clock. Sit down and have that conversation with them and then remind them. But they need to learn how to set those boundaries for themselves, if that makes sense at all. But right now, when we're in the middle of a pandemic and they do have extra time, video games and screen time, that's one of the only ways they're connecting with their friends. That's where they're getting their social supports. Even if it's 3 hours in Fortnite, they're talking to their friends, they're exchanging laughs, they're spending time with people who get them, who, they relate to. Kids and teenagers really need that social interaction. It's so much a part of their social emotional development is, that peer interaction. So if they're spending some extra time, online, video games, chatting, FaceTime, whatever, that's an okay thing. Of course, like I said, don't let them stay up until 4 o'clock, work with them around boundaries and what is and isn't acceptable. But yeah, lighten up on the maintaining the, only 2 hours of screen time, because you're also limiting their access to their friends and their supports.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. You're so full of great advice for everybody, which was the whole point of this program. I think a lot of folks, the chat really got a lot out of all of the advice that you provided here. And I think some of it is not just for parenting either, but general purpose advice for just like getting through this time and being there for your friends and colleagues as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Where can folks find out more about your work?
My website is strivefamilyresources.com. We have some resources up there now. We're redoing a lot of it because parenting before the pandemic is going to be so much different than parenting after the pandemic or during the pandemic. A lot of our content is being redone, reworked, but we are putting stuff up there, and it also has a list of other resources outside of us. Like the Trevor Project, like NAMI, and other places where they can go and get information, especially around the mental health supports that we all need right now.
Absolutely. And we actually learned about you because you contributed to Take This, which is actually one of our partner organizations in the Stay in the Game Relief Fund that you could donate to. Today's the last day. Do it now. Before we logged in, there was only $4,000 left to raise to make our goal. So I think we can do it. But Take This is a really great organization that works on destigmatizing mental health in the games industry. And so thanks to them for introducing us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I volunteered with them, I think, for 3 years now. And it was really a privilege to be able to write an article for them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Erika. It was a pleasure to have you. And we will definitely direct folks to all of your resources. So bye.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that was as useful for you as it was for me. I want to thank all the mods for helping keep this space friendly. You're my favorites. And you can watch all of the videos that we do, Good Tips for Hard Times, at our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/gameshotline. Now, remember, we are in the middle of a fundraiser. We're not in the middle. We're at the end, the real end of it. So if you want to help us get there, you can go to givebutter.com/stayinthegame. And more important than all of that, it's Feminist Frequency's 11th birthday. So please come party with us today, right here on Twitch at 5 p.m. I hope to see you all there. Next week on Good Tips, we're going to be talking to Amelia and Emily Nagoski They are the authors of Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle, about their tips for recovering from burnout and how much of our days we really need to devoting to rest. I cried and sobbed so hard when I saw them speak at XOXO, and I'm so excited to have them come talk about burnout. So we will see you all next week. Bye.